Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 minutes of Torah. Not two dates for Pesach, and not 70 elders, but 10 minutes of Torah. Well, both the 2 dates for Pesach and the 70 elders are going to come into play. But once again, I welcome you to my outdoor studio, and how wonderful it is. And if you hear any extra noises, my apologies for that. So the Torah portion today is Ba'alotcha. It is a strange word. It comes from the same word for aliyah. I know it's kind of hard to hear it in there, but forget the be and the he. Alotcha, aliyah, alotcha. It talks about the lighting of the menorah by the Kohanim, and especially by the Kohen Gadol, actually. And the word for lighting, I mentioned this the other night at the congregational meeting, the word for lighting is not lahadlik, which is what we normally use when we light Shabbat candles. We say lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, or Chanukah, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah in modern Hebrew. Of course, lahadlik in also biblical Hebrew, it means to light, but like many words, there are synonyms. So, you could say you could light, you could kindle. There's 2 synonyms. Well, Ba'alotcha is a synonym of Bahadlik, and it's used because, so we think the word means to go up, right? Aliyah, that you cause the flame to go upwards when you light it. So when you light the flame of the menorah, the Kohanim are told, when the Kohen Gadol goes and lights it, it will go upward. Okay, so that's what the name is about. But there's kind of an interesting combination of laws and finishing up, getting ready to travel in the desert. And, well, it talks about, as they're ready to depart on a journey, talks about what we call Pesach Sheni, which I told you, two dates of Pesach. Of course, we know the usual one, which is the 15th of Nisan, but in its original form, Pesach was sort of the beginnings of how we observe Pesach today, but different. It revolved around eating the sacrificial meal, just like our Pesach revolves around eating the Seder meal. But in order to partake, since it was a holy meal, one had to be pure. Pure, I don't mean like pure and innocent and having leading a life full of virtue, but pure in that you had not come into any contact with death. If you had, you couldn't partake in the Passover sacrifice. So it's a big deal, the Passover sacrifice. What did they do? They say here then that if you couldn't participate in it in its proper day, a month later you get a second chance. It's called Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach. Now, we don't really do anything about that today. It's not much observed, except in the Chabad community, where Chabad on Pesach Sheni, what do? They take some of the leftover shmura matzah, that round handmade matzah that you might have had on Pesach, and they eat it on that day. That's their way of recognizing it. I know of no other significant observance today of Pesach Sheni. We have a few changes in the liturgy. We don't say what's called Tachanun, but that's Pesach Sheni. Well, the Torah portion continues with the making of the final items, which are 2 silver trumpets, and then it tells us in chapter 10 that in the 2nd year, on the 20th day of the 2nd month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle of the pact, and the Israelites set out on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai. Okay, they're ready to go to Israel. Shouldn't be too long, so it would seem, but we'll see. There are a lot of detours. The people, of course, they're not happy. Who would be happy? You're wandering in the desert. Yes, they're free. They're no longer slaves. But as often is the case, we look back on not what was great, but we look back at the things that weren't so great, and that's what they're doing. They begin complaining. They say, this manna that's falling in the wilderness, not enough for us. We remember the fish we used to eat, the fish tacos. I don't say tacos, actually, but the fish we used to eat. It was free. And the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks. They're in the desert. You don't get those kinds of things. What does it mean that it was free? It was free because they were slaves. So they had to be fed as slaves. But yet they're looking back, well, at least we had 3 squares a day, as they would say. So Moses is a bit overwhelmed. And so what does he do? Well, he, of course, calls upon God. And to resolve this crisis, now we have the 70. God calls upon 70 elders to assist Moses. That will become ultimately the number for what's called the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, if you will, for Israel. For various reasons, the 70 gets put up to 71 because it can't be an even-numbered court. But nevertheless, that is sort of the ultimate number, 70. But obviously, you can see its relation. I've talked a lot about numbers over the past few weeks. 70 is, of course, 10 times 7. So there is something going on there, too. Well, after they're appointed, God causes this wind, it says, to blow from quail from the sea, and the people then have meat to eat, so to speak. But God is not very happy with how the people are reacting, and so there's a plague that goes through the camp, and the Torah portion ends with Miriam and Aaron complaining also about Moses, and they are told by God that your complaints are frivolous because Moses is someone special. Interesting comment on saying even Aaron and Miriam, take a look at the big picture. This is Moses who brought people out of Egypt. That's who I speak to. So look at the results. So far, so good. Going out of Egypt, getting a Torah in the desert, being fed every day. So very interesting section that I could talk for a long time on that. But I want to point out 2 particular things. First is, I'm going to show you in the text of the Torah here. So if you can see that, there are, in this section right here, the letter Nun standing separately to kind of mark off this passage. What is this passage? A very familiar passage to all of us. V'yehi bin Sa'aron, v'yomer Moshe. So this is the passage, of course, that we say when we take out the Torah. When the ark went out, it would say, Moses would say, advance, and may your enemies be scattered, and may your foes flee before you. So those 2 nuns, those 2 uninverted nuns as they are called, appear actually in the Torah itself. They are a part of what is known as diacritical marks, which I personally find fascinating. Marks in the Torah that aren't read. Sometimes you have dots over certain words. Sometimes you have large letters or small letters. In this case, you have these inverted nuns. And, well, what are they for? You're going to have to come Shabbat morning, or at least listen on the Zoom to find out what they are for. Well, in the meantime, the context here, obviously, is the great fear that the people have in the desert. Are they going to survive on just manna? I mean, that's a reasonable question. Is God going to be with them the whole time? Will they make it to the land of Israel? Well, we're told an interesting verse here that God went down to the people. So the famous 19th century rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, German rabbi, kind of saved orthodoxy in Germany. He wrote that God's message here to Moses is that I understand what the people are feeling. It's not random. And I'm coming down to them. Why am I coming down to them? You would expect them to come up to God. Why is that the case? Well, Hirsch says, I don't expect, given the people's fears and feelings, for them to be able to rise up to me. Rather, I will go down towards them. I'm going to shorten the distance, God says, according to Hirsch's understanding, and come down to them. And I think it's a great and very important lesson for us all. Whether it's God or our own interpersonal relationship, people always have to be approached where they're at. That's what God is saying. I'm going to come down to them because they can't come up to me right now. So I'm going to do that, and that's true, I think, in general. Sometimes we reach out to someone, and sometimes we wait for them to reach out to us. When the distance is shortened, whether it's between God and the people of Israel or between two people, it is easier to hear what God is saying and perhaps what the other person is saying. We're more ready to hear it, and that distance is now shortened. God has modeled this wisdom in Bahalotcha. Well, this has been 10 minutes of Torah, not 2 times to celebrate Pesach, actually it is, and not 70 elders, well, they are appointed, but 10 minutes of Torah. Shabbat Shalom.